One of the things that the new secretary did, he said he wanted the IG, and everybody in the military knows what the IG is. He wanted the IG to go around and take a hard look at all of the VISNs and take a look at the actual access to care, primary care, emergency care, specialty care, mental health care, and have the IG go through the nitty-gritty at each level and pull those things out and see who got treated when and all that good stuff, and bounce it against the new criteria, which was the 30 days or the 40 miles. And I took a look at those stats that Dr. Mayo Smith had with him that day, and they were in the high 80s for everything except mental health, which was 97%. The VA is taking seriously the suicide issue, which is they ought to, because we are losing more people to suicides than we did to military action. Shouldn't happen, and they're taking it very seriously. If you pick up a phone today and call the VA, the first thing you're going to say is, if this is an emergency, do this and do that. If you feel the particular mental health issues that they elaborate, call this number, because we have crisis lines, we have people that can get you help that you need now. So they're taking that seriously, and it was good to see that the stats in the VISN #1, which is all of New England, that 97% of the people who had issues like that got seen. So get your backside in here right now, and they got seen within, well within the 30 days. When I came back from Nam, before I went over, I was flying B-58s faster than twice the speed of sound, higher than 70,000 feet. There wasn't an airplane in the world that could get up where we were or who could catch us. We thought we were the #1 troops in the world. We were just, nobody can touch us. One afternoon or one evening, a late flight, we were over, I think it was Tonopah, Nevada, and FAA called us, a controller called us and said, "Cowboy 22, decelerate, descend, you have closing traffic from the rear." And the aircraft commander says, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, have a cup of coffee, because there's nobody coming up our pipes from the rear. And the controller said, "Brake right," which means we're not discussing it, do it. Pulled them back, broke right, took a look. There's an SR-71 coming right up the pipes doing Mach 3. All of a sudden, we realized we were not on top of the pig pile anymore. Somebody could fly faster and higher than we could. But I bring that up because I went from there to Vietnam, and when I came out of Vietnam, I was horizontal. Could not even get out of bed by myself. So from going from the top of the pig pen to you can't roll over in bed without help is a bit of a shock. And okay, so how do you handle that? You handle that by realizing you can't change what you can't fix. And how do you deal with it? I have a loving wife who decided that we can make a go of this. And we had young kids who were not allowed to even come in the hospital because Daddy was in a ward where there were a whole bunch of people that were kind of messed up, and that wasn't going to be good for kids. Finally, I got wheeled out horizontally into the back of a station wagon and taken home for Thanksgiving. I had punched out on the 17th of September, and first time I got out of a medical facility was to go home for Thanksgiving. Remained horizontal for that tour of duty and got shipped back to the hospital. Eventually, the VA started getting me up and getting me pasted together and all of that good stuff. But again, how do you cope with it? And one of the things that the DAV does is we have programs that are designed for individuals like I had gone through for coping. This summer, this April, we have about 300 plus individuals who are new amputees, newly paralyzed, tough shape. They go out to Snowmass, Colorado, and we put 2 instructors, not only ski instructors, but instructors of the handicapped, 2 instructors on each person, take them up on the hill and bring them down and make a ski trip of this, not to teach them how to ski, but to teach them that the world has not gone by, that you can do anything. I thought about bringing this story up because at the end of my first tour out there, when I was a student, a newly handicapped student, I noticed that they had television cameras all over the hill. They had still photographers all over the hill. And at the end of the program, they would take clips and put them together so that every single one of the skiers was going to be in a strip of film that you could take home and show to your folks and your parents and your buddies and all that good stuff. Professionally put together, but every single one of the handicapped skiers was going to be in it. So at the end of the program, we go through this closing ceremony, and my wife was with me, and we walked in and the place was jammed. So we worked our way to the back and found a place to sit down, and there's a fellow sitting there to my left who was blind, who had gone skiing. The way they did that is that they would have 2 instructors, and they would put a long pole out in front of him. He hung onto the pole, and they put an instructor on either end. And then after they had gone down the hill a few times and given him a chance to get a feel of it, they would say, okay, let go of the pole. It's going to be still in front of you, but let go of it, right? And by the end of the week, they would say, okay, now they've got on a headset and a boom mic. He's got on a headset and a boom mic, and they're talking to him. They said, okay, now there's going to be 1 instructor down in front of you on the right, 1 instructor behind you on the left, and now you're on your own. So when I go to this closing ceremony and sit down beside this fellow, and he's kind of mopey, and I said, how's it going? He said, really good. And I said, well, everybody here is bouncing off the walls with enthusiasm about what a great program it was, and you don't seem to be enthusiastic. And he said, nope, because nobody's going to believe that I could do that. So when they showed the first run of the clip, I asked him what his number was, because we all wore a bib with a number on it, like an Olympic skier. And they were color-coded. If you were paralyzed, they were red. If you were blind, it was green. And if you were an amputee, it was, orchid or something, whatever. So I said, what was your number? And I watched the film, and when he came by, they had a beautiful shot of him in a slow turn to the left with neither of the instructors in view. He looked like he was all by himself, right? So I elbowed him and I said, don't worry, guy. I said, you're in the film. You're all by yourself. You're wearing a green jacket. Your form is perfect. You're on a left-hand turn. I said, everybody in the world is going to know you skied. And we call that program the Miracle on the Mountain. That kid didn't have his eyes back that night. But boy, they were sparkling like crazy. He was so happy. He was smiling all over himself. We spent a lot of money to make that program happen. That one kid was worth every buck. Every buck. The DAV spends an awful lot of time and energy almost exclusively on taking care of disabled veterans. Their families, their kids, the mom and the dad that got injured. There's a lot of veteran service organizations have a much broader span of focus. Some might do Little League baseball or whatever. They might do oratorical contests, or they might do the Military Officers Association focus a lot on current military support. How are we taking care of the troops that are over there now? Those kinds of things. But the DAV is very, very narrowly focused, laser focused. Disabilities are there's the whole spectrum, obviously. Some of the troops that come back just don't want to put up with any more of the BS. They tried the VA, it didn't work. Their social contacts have changed because they have changed. My sister-in-law runs a facility up in New Hampshire that caters, it's a big wedding venue. She had a marriage that was scheduled for sometime in the future, that sometime was rolling around. The gentleman in the marriage was coming back from Afghanistan, and the bride-to-be called and said, I need to cancel, can I get any of my money back? Because that's not the person that I got engaged to before he went over there. The VA just changed their paperwork. It used to be that, and this is a sore point with me, it used to be that if a veteran decided that he had an issue, I was in Afghanistan, I was in wherever, Iraq, Vietnam, and something happened. A medical issue happened. I got it taken care of and it was okay, but now I've got a problem. And I want the VA to know about it because there is a connection between those two events. The problem then and my problem now are connected. All I had to do was to write a letter or a note or something and send it to the VA and say, I want some help. And the VA had a, quote, duty to support, duty to find the documents to help you make your case. They still have a duty to support, but they have created a entry form now, and you must fill out everything that's in that entry form now or the day doesn't start. Before, if you just sent in that letter, they would date stamp the date they received it. Just said, I received this. The stamp says a date on it, and I received it. That started the clock. And if somewhere down the line they adjudicated, yes, there is a connection, and yes, the problem you have now is connected to what happened to you then, they would give you compensation back to the day that you sent them that letter. Now they've got this new form, and they say if you don't fill out all of the aspects of that form, the clock hasn't started. So, and they don't even have an obligation to tell you that. They just say it isn't there, do it. They don't have to say, fill out this line or do it. It's just not right. The DAV, as I learned just within the last week, has filed a lawsuit against the Veterans Affairs for that form because it is just plain not fair to say to every veteran, you have to know my system and fill it out my way. That's not what the government's supposed to do. The government's supposed to do there to fix the problem. That veteran served, that veteran's got a problem, they're connected, you got to take care of it. None of this BS where we got to play your game. This isn't a recent case, but it's one that sticks in my mind because it was so dramatic. The young man came back from Afghanistan or Iraq or one of those with, it couldn't have been Agent Orange because it was way after Vietnam. Anyway, he had a toxic exposure that had him bedridden. And it got to be so bad that eventually his wife quit her job so that she could take care of him 24 hours a day, which meant the mortgage didn't get paid and the whatever, all of the things went downhill. He had filed correctly, but the VA had decided to consolidate all of those types of cases in one place so that the adjudication of those cases would at least be consistent, if not correct, they would at least be consistent. And I can't argue with that decision, but when this poor guy sitting here in Massachusetts says, I'm calling Boston, which is where I filed my case, and they're saying, well, we don't have that case anymore, it's gone to Philadelphia, and they aren't doing anything with it because they can't make up their minds about how we're going to handle all of these cases, and the guy's dying. And eventually, because they weren't paying their mortgage, the bank sent them a notice, said, you got to pay. You got this contract, you got to pay, you got a mortgage. Eventually, the sheriff shows up and said, you're going to get out of it because the bank wants their building back. So this lady is crying and I need help. And circuitously, they found me and said, what can the DAV do? I'm not an expert on those things, but I did call the supervisor of the National Service Officers in Boston and I said, got this case. And he said, yeah, I'm aware they're doing all of those in Philadelphia or wherever it was. And I said, but I'm told by the family and by the person who contacted me that this veteran is not going to make it more than a few weeks, if that. And if he dies, the case dies and she's got nothing. Find out where it is and move it. He called a friend of his in Philadelphia who was adjudicator down there and said, put the case on the top of the file and adjudicate it, which they did. Now that shouldn't have to happen, but that case got adjudicated in 24 hours, favorably to that veteran. He died within a week. He died within a week. She got disability compensation, or the DIC, the Dependents Indemnity Compensation, and got the house saved. He got a rollback of all of the time from when he originally filed, all of that money that had accumulated and he hadn't received. All of that money came. She was able to pay off a whole chunk of the bank's issue with the mortgage like that. Saved by the bell, but only because the DAV had a good working relationship with the NSOs, and NSOs had a good working relationship with the adjudicators in the VA. The Massachusetts adjudicators sit across the hall from the DAV service officers, and we rented that space intentionally. It's not that anybody's going to get something they don't deserve. It's the fact that sometimes you can jar a eminent case like that one loose and make somebody make a decision, and in that case it did work.